Hello, hello, hello. It's Emily. I was just about to say it's Emily calling, as though I'm leaving you a voicemail. I'm not leaving you a voicemail. I'm right here. Hello, Emily Eldridge here with Inner Work for Greater Good, in which we talk about your inner light, your inner darkness, all those inner struggles, but also your inner powers, so that we can really accelerate your ability to make a positive impact in the world, to really make a difference. I especially love working with leaders and change makers, anybody who's in a position or feels rather and also driven to want to make a positive difference in the world. And the reason why it's called Inner Work for Greater Good is really to emphasize the fact that when we do our inner work, when we really look inward and we can transform our inner darkness back to light and focus our light in alignment with our truth, that's when we can affect greater good in the world. And it's not just about doing it with your job or your profession or your career, but even just on a daily basis, moment to moment, having that positive impact on the world around you, shining your truest, highest, greatest light, really being that radiant presence in the world. That's really how we can make such an amazing difference and do it effortlessly. I often like to say it's not just about what you do, it's about who you are and how you show up in the world and how you can inspire others and have such an amazing impact in their lives without even trying, just by being who you are and shining your most radiant light. So if you are new to our show, welcome. If this is you've seen other episodes, welcome back. I'm always so happy to have you. So today's topic is, for some it might be a bit controversial. Just the mere title of the show is, what do I mean by inner demons? So inner demons is this term that I'm sure you've heard it before, and many of us have heard it. It's been used, I would say, for centuries, if not millennia, to describe inner struggles, what might feel like things that are blocking us from the inside, or like voices that we feel we may have, and just this idea that there's somehow this darkness inside of us. And inner demons, some people would say, means that it's demonic, that it's this inner, the demon has taken possession of this person, or that we have something demonic or innately bad about us. So it could be something that's attributed to being inside of us, that is somehow a part of us, and a part of us is demonic. Or some might say that an inner demon might be that a demon, as though it's this external kind of force, has taken hold of us or someone else. We often use the term possessed by demons, and the demonic forces, these bad energies, these bad forces in the world, and how they can take control over us. And there's historically, even with like the Catholic Church, for example, people talk about exorcisms, or even not just with the Catholic Church, but that historically and religiously there's this association of your inner demons, or of demons and demonic forces that can act upon us. The reason why I want to bring up this term is because I actually used it in the title of my 2013 TED Talk, in which I called it The Truth About Inner Demons. And if you want to check that out, I will put the link in there. Basically, all you got to do is just look up TEDx Talk, Emily Eldridge, The Truth About Inner Demons. So that was back in 2013. And I did that TED Talk I first really officially developed my work by 2010. And I'd been trying to figure out ways to talk about my work, because it really had come through me. And it wasn't like there were really many terms that I found that really felt like they fit with talking about our inner struggles. And so, and to be completely transparent also, when you do a TED Talk, and is that sometimes it's good to have a title that's provocative. And so I felt like, okay, well, if I use that term, then it'll be a little bit provocative, because a lot of people do talk about their inner demons, or they see themselves as having these bad demons inside of them. And so I thought, well, if I title it that, it was another reasoning behind why I titled it that. Is I thought, well, it's going to get people's attention, and people are going to probably possibly feel a bit triggered by that term as well. But the people who, feel like they are struggling with something dark inside of them, that maybe they would learn something from the talk. So in my TED Talk, I recommend that you watch it, because in the TED Talk, I basically talk about how we have these things inside of us and we see them as inner demons. But one of my big messages of the talk is to say that actually what we think is bad about us may not be so bad after all. And it's just a matter of turning towards it and learning about, what are those voices that we carry? What are those bad messengers, it feels like, that we feel like we have inside of us that, guide us to behave in certain ways or cause us to feel certain ways. And I wanted to really turn on its head this idea of an inner demon. And also the idea that when we think of ourselves as somehow being possessed or having some kind of demonic thing inside of us, that what do we automatically want to do? We want to fight that part of us. We see it as bad. We see it as something we need to extract, as something we need to get rid of, as something that we have to just automatically resist because it's causing us to do terrible things. But one of the things that I also wanted to express is to say that actually that's not always the best approach. And I'm going to parse this a bit, but basically that when I talk about, at least in that TED Talk, when I talked about inner demons, I really was talking about those parts of us that we may think are bad or wrong or flaws or weaknesses. And that actually by having this very struggling, resistant attitude or approach to these parts of us, that actually increases the struggle, and it doesn't work. It makes it worse, because if it's a part of us that we're thinking is somehow an inner demon, first of all, you can't get rid of a part of you. It is a part of you. For another thing, that doesn't work. And if you've been watching my channel and this show, you'll see that I talk about this a lot, that basically when we struggle with these parts of us, we're often just adding, if the pain's coming up or we think this is a bad part of us, and then we struggle with it and try to keep it down or push it away or get rid of it, it just fights back. It's just following that whole physics of emotion, as I call it. For every action, there's an equal, or for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if we've got the feeling coming up and then we react against it, it's just going to react back. So one of my big intentions of that TED Talk was to really shift people's perspective about what they're experiencing from inside themselves, that it may not be demonic after all, that it may just be a part of them that's in pain. It may just be an inner critic or an inner monster that has been trying to get your attention. But when you put all that struggle and resistance against it, then it's just going to fight back. And actually, that is what can make those parts of us become even more monstrous. So what might have actually started off as just like a little bit of an inner critic or a part that's telling you that you're not good enough or what have you, and the more you fight against it, the worse it can get, until it becomes this monstrous part. So I use that term inner demons in that TED Talk to be provocative, but also to basically try to say, hey, you think this thing inside of you is demonic or bad. It's not necessarily what you think it is. It may just be a part of you that's doing its very best to protect you or itself, whatever way it knows. But the only way you can really find out is by being curious, turning towards, and learning more about that part. Why does it exist? Where did it come from? What is its message for you? What is its intention? And by doing that, that's how you can then take it through the drawing out process, which I talk about in that TED Talk. I give basically the first few steps of the drawing out process. And I say, here's actually, how you can start to alleviate some of that inner struggle and alleviate some of its inner pain and struggle, and discover that actually what you think is this horrible, dark, terrible part of you is actually just the light in disguise, a part of you that's been caught in struggle and pain and fear and woundedness that may just be doing and saying terrible things because it's trying to get your attention or because it learned it from other people in your life. So yes, it's true that you may have a part of you that's behaving absolutely horribly and abominably because it learned that from people in your life who behaved absolutely horribly and abominably because they were controlled by their own darkness, because they projected it onto you, because they used it to hurt you, or because they were trying to protect themselves, all different kinds of reasons. And so my point is that it's basically that this inner darkness may not be as dark as we think. And it's just a matter of learning the truth, as I said in the title of the TED Talk, the truth about what you see as your inner demons, and to learn to have a new relationship with these parts of you that's healthier, that's more enlightened, that's more empathic, empathetic towards these parts, so that rather than being in such intense fear and pain and struggle with these parts, actually learning to be really present and and present and aware and compassionate. Because when we learn to be that way towards these parts of us that we think are terrible and bad and awful and weaknesses, etc., when we actually learn to have more of that relationship with them, that's when they relax. And that's when we can actually work with them. They become, as we become more open and receptive and understanding and compassionate towards them, then they can also be that way towards us. That's a big part of what I do in my work with the drawing out process, is really actually have that stance towards them. If you've ever worked with me or experienced my work, you'll find that I don't argue with these inner demons. I don't argue with X powers. I don't argue with these parts, because that doesn't work. There might be the occasional time when I will guide someone to have to set boundaries with one and say, it's not okay to treat me that way. So that does happen sometimes. But the vast majority of the time, it's really just a matter of hearing them and honoring them and listening to them. So I wanted to clarify that for a couple of reasons. One, because I really do recommend you watch my TED Talk that talks about the truth about inner demons. But also the inner demons, the term inner demons, I now use the term, if you've seen my show before or seen past episodes, you know that I actually use the term X powers. Now, I don't know if I ever told you all the story about how the term X powers came about, what kind of instigated my choosing and actually creating that term. It actually it's related to Paula Fellingham, because Paula, who is the founder of the Win-Win Women's channel, of shows here, is that she is the one who I went to a wonderful retreat at her home years ago, and I at the time I was using this term inner demons because I'd been trying to figure out, what do I call these things inside of us? I mean, there's so many different terms. It's like some people say, the shadow, the ego, blocks, triggers, wounds, blind spots. I use those terms as well, just to try to get more kind of concrete and specific about, use terms that people would understand. But the point is, I temporarily adopted this term inner demons. And during this retreat, we all kind of, I think, had a private moment, or else she sort of took me aside and she said, Emily, so I hear that, you're using this term inner demons. And she goes, I know that you really want your work to take off internationally, because at the time it wasn't as international as it is now. And she said, I just want to put it out there that, this term inner demons, like, while you and I might understand it in one way, and people sort of from certain cultures might understand it and not feel threatened or anything by it, there are people from other cultures that might actually find it too, I forgot exactly how she put it, but basically, they might have some resistance to it and find it a bit too, it might trigger too much for them. And so it was actually Paula who was the one who really sat down and said, I think you might want to just figure out another term that you can use. And so I thought, absolutely. I took it as information and I thought, well, does this resonate for me? And do I feel like I need to create a new or find a new term? And I really tried to play with other terms. And that's when, literally with actually playing with words and with prefixes and with suffixes, that's where I came up with the term X powers. And as I think I've explained this in a past episode, the term X powers, I chose that term. I actually created it because what I realized in my work is that these parts of us that we fight with, that we think are bad or wrong, they're really just parts of our power that have been distorted by fear or by pain. They feel like they work against our power, right? So an inner critic will feel like it works against our ability to really feel at peace and really feel powerful and really make the biggest difference that we want to make, especially if it's an inner critic that's controlling and like trying to push you down, hold you back. That can definitely feel like it works against your power, but it could also be an inner wounded that feels like it's constantly drawing you down or constantly making you feel sad or hurt or violated or what have you. And so that can feel like it works against you feeling powerful and empowered. So this is where the term X powers came from. I'd already sort of landed on the term empowers because they empower us to be who we're here to be. And what I realized is actually the term X powers works because it feels like it works against our power, which is what the prefix X means, but also that they are, because they are former parts of our powers. They are former parts of our empowers. So that's what X powers are. So the point is that that's where the term X powers came from. That conversation with Paula in which she said, you got to come up with, she recommended, she didn't tell me what to do, of course, but she said, I really recommend that you come up with a different term. And that's when I came up with X powers. And so that's what I use that encompasses anything that feels, any part of you, I want to make that clear, any part of you that feels like it's working against your power. But that also all it needs to be is just brought out of the darkness into the light and transformed back into an empower and that is aligned with your truth, with your purpose, with your light, with your whole sense of being and the reason you're here, that the role you're here to play and the reason you're here, the presence you're here to be in the world in this lifetime. So I wanted to clarify that, but at the same time, so that's what I mean by the term inner demons, but that's also, I also want to explain too, it's that bring in this idea that even the term inner demons is a misconception, that a lot of time it stems from how we're taught to feel about ourselves and treat ourselves. And that a lot of it does come, and I'm not going to go into like an historical sort of tome about this, but the historical reasons why we use those terms, they're possessed by demons, and the religious reasons, people often talk about demons. And there's even terms like people will tell you that even the word demon comes from daemon, which was not a bad thing. It was actually a positive spirit. So there's this whole rich history, and I'm afraid I did not do the research for this episode, but I just want to put that out there, that look up the term daemon, Daemon, and that there's actually a whole, that almost that the idea of a demon has been twisted based on our perceptions of it. And, as history has gone along and people have twisted the meanings of things and come to misinterpret the actual meanings of a word. So I just want to put that out there, and that what's ended up happening, or I don't know, chicken or egg, is that it's oftentimes because of how we've been taught to see ourselves. We've been taught to see that we are bad or wrong or flawed, or that these inner demons are bad parts of us that we need to get rid of. I want to open space though, because for this conversation, even about demons here. And I know this is kind of a heavy thing that we're getting into here, and this is where I understand it's a bit controversial. Everybody has their different perceptions and concepts of light and darkness and, the universe and God and, souls and why are we here? And, do we even have a reason to be here? Or are we just sort of this, kind of amazing mixture of molecules that created us? Were we divinely designed or what have you? I have my own thoughts and feelings about that. But at the same time as I might have my own perceptions and beliefs about it, I also know that I don't know everything. And that I think that anytime we decide that we've already have it figured out, whatever the it is, that's where we can get ourselves into trouble. That we can, if we cling too dearly to any particular belief or perception, then anything that could come along that is different from that, it's almost like it threatens to undermine what we think is true, and that can actually cause us to be even more like, hard and fast to what we think is true. And that's where I say, you know what, I found that that's not a space of peace for me, that the both and accepting that many different realities can exist at the same time and many different truths can exist at the same time. That's where I find the peace. And so my point is, I want to put this out here that I do think there is a reason why we even have this idea of demons, or at least, some people perceive this idea that there are demons, that there is darkness, there are dark forces. I understand that biblically there are certain, modes of thought, that in terms of, Hinduism, there are certain modes of thought. I mean, there are all these different spiritual traditions, Buddhism, there are all these different spiritual traditions that have their own ideas of the dark forces that may or may not exist, and why they may or may not exist, where they come from, etc. There are a lot of stories around that. So I will say this, I will say that I personally have had experiences that have made me think that I think there's more than meets the eye. I'll put it that way. I think that there are certain forces that can act upon us, that can act upon people around us, that are at play in the unseen, and that they can do their things, and I also think that a lot of them see it as that they're just doing their jobs. So in this world of duality, darkness and light, that in order for us to fully know our light and really experience it and learn to embrace it, part of that journey is actually having to face our own darkness, deal with opposition and struggle and resistance and fear and all of those things. And so I would just say that I do think that there are possibly dark forces that act upon us, that can act upon us. And some people might call them demons, some people might call them entities, some people might call them attachments, or soul loss. There are all kinds of terms for the kinds of things that can act upon us. I should say, actually, those things can act upon us sometimes because of soul loss. That's a whole other thing. That gets into shamanism, which I don't know a lot about. I just experienced shamanic healing and I thought it was really amazing. But anyway, the point is, I do believe that those can exist. So I'm not trying to say that if we're calling something an inner demon, or that, I do think that people can actually be struggling with these forces. So I don't want to say that it's, oh no, it's all just you and you just need to transform it. I would actually say that a lot of the times, if not the majority of the times, what we think are these dark, bad parts of us, they really are just parts that can be transformed back to light. But then that there are other things that can act upon us that can cause us to have certain recurring reactions to things or go into dark places, and that no amount of inner work, of like transforming that inner darkness back to light. Sometimes realities, there's just other stuff going on. Okay. I think what I'm getting at here in terms of, I just really want to allow space for that and not make it come across as though it's all just one thing. We could have multiple things going on inside of us that are causing us to feel the way we feel and not show up in the most radiant ways that we know that we can possibly show up. So this is all by way of saying that here's what I would offer. And I am not an expert in this stuff. I've had my experiences. There are other people who are experts in this stuff. And of course, everybody's got their different approach and different ways of seeing it. But here's what I have done for myself in a very kind of general way. And sometimes I'll do this if I feel like I'm struggling with something that I'm like, is this really me? Is just to kind of clear my own energy field, is I will say things like, to whatever if I just have a feeling that there might be something other than parts of me that are causing problems, I will say, if you are not of the light, I will say this out loud or I will invoke it silently, but I can say, if you are not of the light, then you are not welcome here. Leave. Oof, that was really cool. That kind of felt cool. It was like, whew. So that's something that I will just want to offer as a possibility for if when we're talking about light and darkness, when we're talking about, since I'm bringing up even this topic of demons and inner demons, I just want to put that out there as a simple technique that I tend to use. If you are not of the light, right? So what we want is of the light. We don't want anything that is not of the light. If it's of the light, it's good as far as I'm concerned. If you're of the light, you're good. If you're not of the light, you are not welcome here. Leave. I'm telling you to leave. And so what's powerful about that is you're setting a boundary and you're making it clear that you only want the light in you and in your sphere and in your orbit, and that anything else that's not of the light has to leave. And so in that way, you're also, it's not like you're saying, the parts of you that have fallen into darkness, they're not of the darkness. They've fallen into darkness. They need to be brought back to the light. So you're not banishing any part of you that can be transformed back into light, but you're setting a boundary with anything else that is not of the light, and it's not okay for it to be here. So that's something that I just want you to know that I do sometimes. Another thing that I do as well, quite frequently actually, just because I live in a big city, and I mean, this can happen anywhere, it can happen in small towns, but I just think it's important to recognize that, when there can be a lot of like stuff around. And so I will call on Archangel Michael. He's kind of my, or I'll do like Archangel Michael, Raphael, there are a lot of them, but my main one is Michael. And I've had some experiences that, I didn't grow up Catholic. It's not as though I'm doing this from any religious point of view personally. But I just find that Archangel Michael, as a warrior of the light and a being of light and a sword of light, that if I ever feel nervous, if I'm going into a certain area, or if I'm around certain people, or, if I'm just in a certain situation, I will or even if I'm feeling like I need to do this, I will call on Archangel Michael and to protect me and and his angels of light. And so just so you know, that's something else that I do. And when I do that, I immediately feel better. And I always say that really, what's the bottom line? What is it that helps you feel most at peace? And also helps you feel most at peace with others around you. Those are my sort of qualifications when it comes to whatever it is that we believe. I think that's it, because the reality is people have different beliefs. Some of them are certain religious traditions, some of them are a little more new age, and some of them are, atheistic, whatever. And I'm like, you know what, if that's what brings you peace, if that's what feels most right and true and peaceful for you, and it enables you to be a better person and a better human being in the world, bless you. That's personally all I care about. If it means you show up better in the world, then great. If it causes you to be rejecting of certain people or rejecting of others, or if it reinforces your biases, then if a certain belief, religious tradition or whatever does that, then I would say, well, you might want to revisit that. You might want to reconsider that. And you might want to reconsider, if you're using that religious belief to kind of reinforce some stuff that you got going on inside that may not be so healthy or helpful or loving or kind. So just want to put that out there. But anyway, so I realize this has been a kind of an unusual topic, but I just felt like I wanted to acknowledge that because I personally have had experiences that are beyond just me just transforming parts of me, because I've done a lot of inner work on myself over the years. I mean, constantly working on myself. And at the same time, I think there are just some things that, whether they were passed down to me or sort of come along because of my life experiences, that are not necessarily stuff that I can necessarily do the inner work to release. And so I just want to allow space for that. and in this subject of, inner demons and what we consider to be our inner demons, that there are some parts, absolutely 100%, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the inner demons, or I talk about X powers. These are the parts of us that have fallen into darkness, that can be and need to be brought back to light. But then, there are other things, and then there are other healers for those situations, and there are other things that we can do to deal with, as I described, deal with those other forces, other energies that are not of the light, and therefore are not welcome. So, I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. As always, check me out, or check out the website, www.changelight.world. We've got an online course. We've got a community. I've got private coaching, all kinds of wonderful stuff for you. So if you are curious about any of this or want to learn more, feel free to reach out to me, and or join our community and come on in, because I share a lot more awesome stuff in there. All right. I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you next week. Bye.